Well, the White Sox made some franchise history, but it was for the Royals. Let's discuss how badly things went in Kansas City this weekend on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the fan side of the network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. Additionally, follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the White Sox have now lost 14 straight in Kansas City, and that is a franchise record for the Royals. And let's discuss just how bad things went this weekend and a couple of silver linings. Then the Savannah Bananas were in town over the weekend, and I want to discuss how they busted a myth regarding drawing folks to Bright Field. And finally, it's Monday. Let's do a Minor League Monday report. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. All right, so this series had all the greatest hits in how the White Sox lose in Kansas City. You had Bobby Witt Jr. being a menace at the plate, Salvador Perez hitting a big home run, and the White Sox bullpen not being able to protect a late lead. And Chicago's lineup, well, they just produced 5 runs all weekend. So let's see. That should scream bingo for those playing how the White Sox lose to the Kansas City Royals. Bingo card there. What I didn't have on my bingo card, though, was Jonathan India crushing a 450-foot home run off of reliever Steven Wilson yesterday to tie the game at 2. And also didn't really see Grant Taylor give up a couple more runs in the 8th inning. And, the hope was Steven Wilson, who's been somewhat of your most reliable reliever, and Grant Taylor, who's supposed to be at least your high leverage reliever, the 23rd best closer in baseball, according to Bleacher Report. The hope was maybe these guys could actually nail down a 2-0 lead. Ain't wrong, because that's what the White Sox do when they go to Kansas City. They blow leads, or they let Bobby Witt Jr. basically be the Hall of Famer that he could potentially be, or Salvador Perez, who probably will be a Hall of Famer, just continue to crush home runs. And, the White Sox were 3 games of get right for the Royals. Remember, the Royals were a game under 500, kind of trailing off in the playoff race, and now they're basically 4 games back of the wild card, and they're 2 games above 500. And the Sox are just back to being bad, real bad. Not fun bad, real bad. They've won just 2 of their past 13 games. And I thought to myself, though, there's at least 2 silver linings from this series. And there's also a move that the front office does have to make in the offseason at some point. But the silver linings, because I don't want to be all doom and gloom. And wins and losses, again, they don't matter this year. They don't. Development does. So one developmental data point that we now have for next season in 2027 too is, can they show progress against the division? Not only winning, potentially, snapping this 14-game losing streak at Kauffman Stadium, which is now a franchise record for the Royals over a single opponent at home, but can you start to beat your division? And the Sox are 9-27 this year against the AL Central. So obviously what they got to do next year, as they hopefully add a few more pieces, even if they're bridge pieces to upgrade the roster, to start moving up in the standings, because, next year you would like to move that, see them move up a little bit, maybe to 4th place, especially if the Twins cut payroll. Again, I'm not expecting competitiveness until 2027. And we're seeing a foundation being laid, but there's still so many ups and downs. They're still trying to, Edgar Carroll's still trying to figure out, should I drive for power, just make contact? Same with Kyle Teal. Kauffman Montgomery has to be more consistent in terms of, just hitting the ball beyond just home runs, which is great. I mean, you just got all these things going on where it's going to be hard to be competitive in 2026, but maybe you can dare to dream and be like, hey, especially if the Twins cut payroll, could you get to 4th place maybe? But they got to start beating the AL Central a little bit more. I mean, again, 9-27, and they've been outscored by the Royals 44-25. The Guardians have outscored the Sox 46-29 this season. The Tigers 48-35. The White Sox only have a -3 run differential with the Twins, 24-21. And they've only played 6 games, so you still got to play the Twinkies a few more times. But thankfully, the White Sox never have to go back to Kansas City this season. It's done. But again, these are teams that you face 13 times a year, a third of your schedule. So if you want to start moving up in the standings, start beating your division. Produce some offense against them too. I mean, my gosh, this team just struggles to score runs, especially against the Royals. Now, the second silver lining, though, at least for this season, where again, wins and losses don't matter. And hey, if you lose a little bit, it's still fine in the long run because you are still staying firmly entrenched at the top of the MLB draft lottery standings. The White Sox still firmly lead the Tankathon standings. And I know it's just the chance of getting the top pick, but you want to give yourself the best possible odds. And they're still there. They still got an opportunity. And why that matters is they are doing what the club during the last decade's rebuild, failed to do. And that was lose enough games. Because remember, Bobby Witt Jr. could have been on the White Sox right now had the Sox not beaten the Royals so much in 2018. So they are at least losing enough to make sure that they've got a chance to get a stud, because next year's draft, they're saying at least the top 5 could be some serious studs. I think the kid out of UCLA, I think he's a center fielder. I mean, they need a center fielder of the future. So it's great that they've cleared last year's win mark. I would love for them, even though it's still bad, but it is a sign of progress. I would love for them to get to 55 wins. But remember, the Sox could get to just 50 wins the rest of this season. And the arrow is still going to be pointed up because, again, the goal of the season was developing a core. I would say that that's pretty much mission accomplished. I'm going to have Beefloaf on from the 108 on Wednesday to discuss the official core that he's got. But I mean, Colson Montgomery, Caro Teal, Miguel Vargas, Chase Mydroth, Brooks Baldwin, Shane Smith, Davis Martin, Sean Burke, Grant Taylor, and Mike Vassell. They have all emerged now as core, and you just want to see them now finish strong. Although you're going to have to live again with some bumps in the road, like Taylor having a developmental issue, developmental bump yesterday. I mean, gets that big out in the 7th to keep the game tied, but then falls apart in the 8th. He's going to have to figure out how to throw strikes more consistently. Although one solution would be, and I know Steve Sohm pointed it out on the broadcast, maybe you might want to throw him a little bit more, because again, he went from August 11th to August 17th, 6 days in between starts. Maybe you're not going to be as crisp. And Davis Martin did deserve better, by the way. He pitched 6 strong innings of shutout ball yesterday, only to have his terrible handling high leverage situations bullpen just absolutely blow it. I mean, that's another developmental data point next year. Can the bullpen handle high leverage situations? But one thing is clear, the White Sox have to DH Lenny and Sosa. He had 2 home runs over the weekend, and as bad as producing a way better average and way better power than Andrew Benintendi, he just cannot field first base. Had another fielding gaffe last night. So you just got to find a way to get rid of Andrew Benintendi, because I envision a world where, at least through this rebuild portion, Sosa's your DH. Can you get rid of Benintendi to open up left field to have Kyle Teal play sometimes there when he's not catching? And that you don't have to worry about getting at bats for Andrew Benintendi. But just please stop Lenny Sosa at first base. This just has to stop. Hide his first base glove. Maybe just have him play second base a day a week. But I think he's earned core status, at least through the rebuild, but just nowhere on the field. Well, the Savannah Bananas, they were at Rate Field over the weekend. By all accounts, they rocked the house and drew 80,000 fans, and I want to discuss how that breaks a stereotype regarding drawing fans to Bridgeport, and that's after the break. And this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind. And whether you got your eye on a big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the game. And I'm looking forward to see what Caleb Williams does this season playing for Ben Johnson. We got a nice preview last night Although as the season starts, maybe you might want to choose less on what Prize Picks projects for Chicago's offense, but then go with more as everyone gets more comfortable. And I love how Prize Picks is just so simple to play. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, it gets your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. Again, still in the temporary location for recording. Hopefully my basement studio will be up and running on Wednesday. So that way I can get back to, where I'm more comfortable. I've got the White Sox stuff and I don't feel like I'm in this like tunnel right now. Well, I know someone is going to be in the comments after, I post this about how Wright Field is in a neighborhood that is a war zone, how unsafe it is, and Chicago's decaying and blah, 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 talking points, that type of stuff. Because I've had many guests on this show, like the From the 108.com guys, Josh Nelson of SoxMachine.com, Shane Reardon, formerly of The Score, WBBM's Rob Hart, all go over how vibrant the neighborhood Wright Field is located has become. I mean, I've had a bunch of people dispel the myth that Wright Field is not in a war zone, but yet you get these guys like owner Jerry Reinsdorf, for example, the team's very own owner, and these Cub fans manufacturing arguments about how riddled with crime it is around Wright Field. How Wright Field is just so unsafe. It's in a terrible neighborhood. Southside is terrible. And yes, at one point, like back in the 50s and the 60s, it was a rough area. But Bridgeport is starting to become vibrant. And I know you can throw facts at a lot of the people on the other side of the argument that are like, again, it's a war zone. It's terrible. Even though it's now considered one of the relatively safer neighborhoods in Chicago per Movado.com, but never let facts get in the way of a good stereotype that I still believe, has been contrived by a lot of Cubs fans. Just, believe that you should only go to Wrigley Field because that's the only ballpark ever, even though it's just the world's biggest sports bar. And that's what it is. And I will say this, if Wright Field is such a war zone, then why did 80,000 people over 2 days show up to basically watch what is in essence exhibition baseball? Because that's what the Savannah Bananas drew to Wright Field over the weekend. And also the Savannah Bananas are family entertainment. So it's not like this was some event meant for the 21-year and older crowd. It was meant for, kids and families to come out. So families came out to the South Side for an evening game to watch a guy throw a baseball on stilts, basically. Man, do they risk their life. And again, I'm not bashing Banana Ball. I saw on social media because that's how I was able to follow it. And it seemed like on Friday's game, definitely pretty much all of White Sox Twitter was basically all about the Savannah Bananas. I don't think anybody wanted to recognize the White Sox were actually playing Friday night. And they did a great job of tapping into the nostalgia by bringing back Mark Burley, AJ Przinsky, Paul Konerko, and Ozzie Guillen. So I also applaud the Bananas for trying to make baseball fun again. I actually have no problem with the Savannah Bananas. I think it's an interesting take. And shout out to Steve-O White Sox on X, formerly Twitter, for quote tweeting a picture another fan took, MDowney14. I can't share the tweet actually for those watching on YouTube because I'm not authorized to show the picture. I probably could have asked both of them. But basically, this is what Steve-O White Sox said. He said, next time someone tells you that nobody goes to White Sox games because how much of a dangerous war zone the area around the stadium is, show them this picture. And it's basically a picture of a huge crowd trying to get into Wright Field to see the Savannah Bananas. And it got me thinking, again, that's right there. It totally is dispelling the myth. If you have an entertaining product, people will come. because especially around the ballpark, it's relatively safe. But if you want to think that the owner who wants you to think that there's magic bullets flying around so he can move the team to a new ballpark in the South Loop built by taxpayer dollars, then continue to believe that stereotype, even though it's pretty much 99% false. And cities do have crime, walk-in crowd, that type of stuff. There's plenty of security around Wright Field. And the reason why the White Sox are not drawing right now is there's just not a winning or entertaining product on the field. And the owner has upset us White Sox fans enough to where it's like, it's hard to go beyond maybe checking out one game a year. Some of us just don't want to battle the Dan Ryan traffic for those that actually have to drive to a game, because Jerry has made being a fan so frustrating. It's really hard to battle if you're coming to the South Side from like anywhere that you have to go through the loop to hook into the Dan Ryan. Do you really want to sit through that traffic? Now, the great thing about Wright Field too is it's easily accessible through public transportation, but don't take the L. Don't take the L. I've taken the L many times and felt safe. But most of us we're not going to blindly loyally follow the team because, hey, they got old style pouring in the ivy. It's growing out in the outfield walls. It looks so nice. It's a weed, by the way. And by the way, I don't want to speak too much Cubs business. Notice Tom Ricketts, though, is starting to act exactly like the Tribune Company did when they owned the Cubs. And he gets his World Series, and now he's just going to do just enough to make the team interesting, but not spend too much where it affects maximizing profits. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, both fan bases are getting scammed right now. That's just the truth. The Cubs could have went out and made some more moves to make sure that they secure that they have a chance to win the World Series. Now they have to hope on variance, because they still should make the playoffs. But anyways, Wright Field probably could draw if you had a winning product, and also if you just got rid of this lazy stereotype, because that is, part of it is, it's a reporter once got attacked in Armour Square Park, even though that turned out to be false. Or the owner said that fan who got shot, the bullet came from outside the stadium. Okay. Sure. I'll believe that it was, just like there was a second gunman on the grassy knoll. Lee Harvey acted alone. Okay. Just saying. But if you have an entertaining product, people will come in, and it's starting to form, and it could turn into a winning product too. But until then, it's really hard to rationalize, should I keep going to this ballpark? Other than to maybe go to one game just to see what these young kids can do it in person and enjoy some good food and mingle with other White Sox fans. Because us White Sox fans, we're a good group of people. And basically the food and hanging out with some White Sox fans, that's the draw right now. And it's fine, but it's not something that maybe you want to go out consistently for. And I do think the ballpark being surrounded by parking lots does give Wright Field the appeal of going to a morgue. So yeah, that's the other thing. You got to have like an event. So like, it would be nice if the White Sox made their games feel more and more like events. Like when Bill Veeck was the owner, it was an event. And at the same time, the tailgate culture though is still fine. But if Justin Ishbia wants to, when he takes over the team, develop the neighborhood like Jerry could have done 44 years ago, maybe you do start to draw. But remember, Jerry wanted his parking lot revenue, and the neighborhood has been taking it on the chin ever since. Well, it's Monday, so it's time to do another Minor League Monday report. And boy, did the White Sox top prospect, Braden Montgomery, have himself a weekend in Pensacola. Although, according to one prospect guru, he's not the White Sox top prospect. So let's discuss that after the break. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. I'm not exactly hopeful Chicago makes a stunning run to the Super Bowl. Last night's game was fun, but it's still preseason. And that's why I think it would be so cool to see Josh Allen in Buffalo finally breaking through and winning the title. Remember, last night was just preseason. So why not double or your triple or your money by putting some money down on Allen winning NFL MVP and Buffalo winning the whole thing? Although if you want to be safe, I would go with Patrick Mahomes for NFL MVP and Philadelphia repeating. And I always maintain FanDuel's traditional money lines, the spreads, the over-unders, they are definitely fun to play. But if you want to win some serious cash, then you got to go with FanDuel's props, parlays, and futures. You can always parlay a couple of division winners like, say, Philadelphia, Kansas City, and Pittsburgh and still make some serious dough. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox wherever they get their podcasts, as this show's available on all major podcast platforms. And hope you had a fun weekend. Mine, I had to spend moving some furniture around to get ready for my basement to be basically gutted as the carpet had to be ripped up because it got flooded. Did make a quick trip down to Johnsburg, Illinois to see basically the entire family. So, relatively decent weekend there. Well, Braden Montgomery showed why he is a superstar in the making this past week in Pensacola. The team's top-ranked prospect per MLB Pipeline hit a double in all 6 games he played. He had 4 multi-hit games, including going 3 for 4 on the 14th, and he drove in 5 runs during the 6-game series. He went 11 for 22 during that entire series for the AA Birmingham Barons. And his slash line on August 9th for the Barons was 214, 267, 286. And you're starting to get a little nervous because he's just flailing at everything and swinging at everything. You're wondering, did they rush him up to AA? Should he have stayed at high A just a little bit longer? And now his slash line is 324, 410, 500. Although ESPN's Kylie McDaniel, he doesn't think Braden Montgomery is the White Sox top prospect. No, he's actually going with Colson Montgomery as his top prospect for now, because Colson will eventually graduate. But Kylie McDaniel, he's I like his analysis when it comes to draft analysis and prospect analysis. He just came out with his recent top 10 prospect list for every team, and he released it on the 14th. And he actually doesn't even think Braden Montgomery is in the team's top 5 prospects. So that's a little bit, startling to see. And the reason why I want to go over this list is because, again, it just shows you how different publications and different, prospect gurus view guys. And it doesn't mean you need to get all worried. It just means be cautiously optimistic. I mean, that would be one thing that I would preach during this entire rebuild. Let's not be like it was in the last rebuild where it's like, oh, we got Eloy, and we got Yohan Moncada, and we got Andrew Vaughn, and these guys are going to be awesome, and they're going to be the greatest things since sliced bread, and we're not even going to think that there's a possibility that they can't develop at all, and they're going to get hurt, and blah, blah, blah. Just enjoy the ride, but just know there could be some pitfalls. It's not linear. It's not just straight up. But here's Kylie McDaniel's top 10 list for the Sox. Obviously, 1, he's got Colson Montgomery. Number 2, shortstop, third baseman, Caleb Bonenberg. Number 3, pitcher Noah Schultz. Number 4, pitcher Hagen Smith. Number 5, shortstop and recently first-round draft pick Billy Carlson. Number 6, Braden. 7, outfielder and recently second-round pick Jaden Fauske. Number 8, infielder Jacob Gonzalez. Number 9, pitcher Peyton Pallette. And number 10, outfielder George Wolcott. And this is the blurb he has. He didn't really go into much detail about why he, has this ranking, but this is the little blurb he has. Montgomery and Schultz started the season as the top 2 prospects and ended at number 1 and number 3, but had rocky seasons. Montgomery's about to graduate, started really slow and fell down the list, but is now raking in the big leagues. Schultz is having trouble throwing strikes, as is Smith, and if this continues next season, it'll be time to worry. Bonenberg has been really good. Wolcott is hitting more than I expected, and I like the draft additions of Carlson and Fauske. So the one thing is, again, this is an example of a guy, though, that might be a little bit too high on Jacob Gonzalez, for example, because, this is what MLB Pipeline has for their top 10. Braden is number 1, Schultz 2, Colson 3, Carlson 4, Bonenberg 5, Smith 6, Fauske, 7. Number 8, Tanner McDougal. Number 9, Christian Upper. And number 10, Kyle Lodice, the recently third player that the Sox drafted in the 3rd round. And I would say Tanner McDougal should be probably in the top 10 ahead of Peyton Pallette and Jacob Gonzalez because of just, again, what McDougal's doing right now in the minors and the stuff. And they got Wokol at 11th, Pallette at 15th, Gonzalez all the way down to 17th. And I still think that's kind of fair because Gonzalez has been so up and down during his career, and he just keeps giving off the vibe that he's going to be nothing more than a raised floor player. But McDougal, Oper, these guys can be legit aces. So it's kind of interesting how these guys just look at things a little bit differently. And then FutureSox.net, they also released their updated top 30 prospects list last week. And I'm just going to go over their top 10. I think you should, go to FutureSox.net to read the entire write-up of their top 30. But this is, their top 10. 1, Schultz. 2, Braden. 3, Colson. 4, Carlson. 5, Bonemer. 6, Smith. 7, McDougal. 8, Fauske. 9, Upper. 10, Sam Atanacci. And Sam Atanacci has definitely been producing. So maybe McDaniel and Pipeline is kind of missing the boat on Sam Atanacci because he's definitely been hitting very, very well at high A, and he's at double A now, and he's doing okay. But you have 3 lists, 3 varying degrees. One is high on Braden, another, just not as high, but still pretty high, and another has him trending down. It's just kind of one of those things that scouts kind of look at everything a little bit differently. They might value, strikeouts as a terrible thing, where some scouts might look at it and say, you know what, you can live with the strikeouts as long as he's just mashing doubles and home runs. So it's not something to be like, oh my gosh. Like, again, the White Sox, and I talked about it with Brett Hafner from Sox on 35th last week. The White Sox farm system, according to MLB Pipeline and Baseball America, dropping all the way to the low teens. It's not something to get totally nervous about because they were very top heavy. We knew that there were some issues with the depth, but at the same time, they've got some guys that could be potential good players. And they've got some middle infield prospects that they might have to move to the outfield. Especially like if Sam Atanacci and Bonemer keep raking at the minors, where are you going to put Jarrell Perez, for example? And William Bergola, especially if Colson Montgomery is hitting so well. And you got Billy Carlson, who's probably one of the best fielding prospects in all of baseball. So at some point, you might have to be like, we should need to try some of these guys out in the outfield. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow with your mailbag questions, and make sure to get them in either by tweeting them at LockedOnSox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. And again, feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the White Sox having a miserable series in Kansas City, the Savannah Bananas dispelling a myth about drawing fans to right field, and this week's Minor League Monday Report. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at TajDub, or at LockedOnSox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.